Morning. I think this is live anyway. Jeez, you're all up and ready. How's Kat? How's Wayne? Morning, morning, morning. How are you all keeping? Yeah, all doing well this morning. I'm still uploading my shorts. I was doing a short on Donica, King of Munster, between 10:22 to Mihal. I didn't know you were going to be up at this time. Mihal. I bet you Mihal wants to jump on. Mihal, do you want to jump on again, do you? I'm going to talk about 10th century Ireland this morning. 10th century Ireland, with all the fighting between what was it called? The men of Dublin and the men of York. Well, I suppose not too much men of York. The Anglo-Saxons, really, like. But I have to, what was it called? Since 8 o'clock, putting together this short, and it's a bit slow downloading this morning. So I'm still in the middle of posting it up. Du-du-du-du. If you want to jump on there, Mia Live, the code for you. Actually, I might send it to you over on Facebook now. If you want to jump on, unless you're going to bed now, are you? I don't know. Back in the day, oh I, when the what are we called again? The men of Dublin were attacking the north of England, because that's what I want to talk about this morning. But I'm still uploading my short on Donica MacBreen. Bum, bum, bum. 1 second. Send it over to. I'm doing 20 things at once now. And I'll remove this part. There we go. And location, clear. 1 second. I need to post up my short. Yeah, I'll do. Go. Yeah, I'll put that over to Mihal if he wants to jump in. Bum, 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 bum. I should really go to bed. Oh, that's grand. You can pop off to bed there if you want to, Mihal. And I will waffle away about, what was it called? What was it called? The 10th century Ireland. How's Jim keeping? How's Kevin? How are you, mate? How are you doing, boys? Any news with you? How was work today, Kevin? Did you just get the same crap as you did today? What was it earlier today? That's uploaded there. That's up on the Instagram. I'll pop over to YouTube and post that show up now. Get them views up. Uploading. I tried uploading this earlier. Gee, was it slow this morning? And it wasn't the actual uploading. It was getting the permission off the AI to post it up. So the joys of uploading is fun. Bum bum bum. How's everyone this morning? Mihan, how are you keeping your research? Bum, 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 bum. Right, click on that, and and I think I just need to edit this bit out. Edit that out. Location, clear, Ireland, clear Ireland. Oh yeah, there it goes. And upload. Bum bum bum. No, today's route was good. That's good to hear, man. God, sometimes like it work can be bad enough. Never mind having incidences like that happening while you're at your workplace. Like Jesus Christ, like how are you keeping from New York? How's New York this morning? Cold, or is it still snowing up there? Is it snowing up there, or what's the crack? That's uploading there. The short is onto the YouTube. It's already on TikTok and it's on Instagram, but it's going on to YouTube right now. I should really post it onto, what was it called? X is it called now? You know, Twitter. I might actually post it over to Twitter now. Maybe. Research is going great. Finally back on full speed. Tomorrow should be. Oh, nice. Man, I'm struggling to post up one short. Never mind three right now. I was flying during the summer. During the summer, I was like boom, boom, boom. But now I'm terrible at posting up the shorts. Even yesterday, I was struggling to put together a short, and then didn't put it together until. Do you know what? I should actually start doing that. I noticed I posted up the short there, and now it's like advertising that I'm live. Maybe I should start doing that. Post up a shirt just as I'm going live. Onto the old YouTube. Oh my god, where's my Irish this morning? Um, I'm literally thinking Japanese with the old komboa. Do you quit? Do you more quit? What's the one? I'm thinking about ah the gears. My brain is coming together. Do you quit? Do you more quit? Kunde citato fi shikama, ni rev shikama. I think I'm the only one who doesn't have any social media except for YouTube. You only need YouTube, so that's grand. All the other social medias is just wild right now. Absolutely wild. So I think that's up on everything. Maybe I'll post up on X for the crack. For the crack. Going on Donica MacBreen. I'll post it up there. Although I never get views on X. On X, Irish medieval history, and I never get any views or anything on it. Maybe I don't know. I'll post up there for the crack. Posts. Maybe I'm just doing it wrong. And do this. Move that. Because I have different. Okay. I got that up anyway. That's the main thing. I will let you know if. Oh yeah, 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 yeah. I don't remember how to spell the ending. Oh right, 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 right. Okay, right. I have that downloaded everywhere now. The short is, and this morning, did I pop that other map? No, I did. Right, I just want to talk about 10th century Ireland, which kind of, let me quick get that map up. It kind of gets its foundations, 10th century Ireland. Now, 10th century Ireland, Viking Age Ireland, is so different to 9th century Ireland because everyone assumes that 9th century Ireland is just like 10th century Ireland. And we kind of just skip 10th century Ireland and go straight to 11th century Ireland with Brian Brew. So, what I mean is that the Viking Age starts, right? And between 793 up to around 836, 840, 850, we've got a lot of raiding that happens in Ireland, right? Did I save that whatsoever? Okay, right. Give us a second there. I'll go back to this one, right? But what I'm trying to say is that early on, between 795 to 840, you have the basic Viking raids that come into Ireland, right? And they come in from the north and they start attacking against the coastal areas, right? And they attack all the monastic settlements. While the Irish themselves, the Enail and the Onocta, they don't care about all this fighting in the coastal areas. They're fixed on fighting each other over the law of St. Patrick and the law of St. Columba. Okay? That's their main meat, which I talked about yesterday. And people assume this is what dominates medieval Ireland, right? And as we go into around 850, then we have Turgus, who invades, penetrates into Ireland. But people then assume Turgus is successful in this. He's not. So there's a kind of a rewriting of history. This idea that Turgus is successful coming into Ireland, that he successfully builds Dublin, and that becomes his capital, right? He doesn't. It is true that he builds the Long Fort in Ireland, But from there, he's beaten by male Shocknod the First, and he's killed. Right, so he's not even subjugated like other Vikings. He's outright killed by male Shocknod the First. And so the invasion of Ireland by the Vikings is sort of a massive failure, on their half. What you do have is later on the likes of Ivor the Bonus, Olaf the White. They come into Ireland and they start to become a part of society. They marry into the king groups, they foster their children out, and not only did they take hostages, but they also give hostages, especially to the likes of Clan Coleman, the High Kings of Ireland, and also the Kenloan, who also become High Kings of Ireland as well. Okay? So in many ways, the Eemers, the main dynasty of these kind of Hiberno-Scandinavians, these kind of Irish Vikings, are subjugated into Irish society. And then from there, we go on to the 10th century. Okay, so at this point, the Eemers, who are the main dynasty of the Dublin Vikings, are somewhat, not completely, but somewhat digested into Irish society to a certain degree. Although it's very much debated between historians and academics how digested they are. The reason why it's so debated is because we're missing two really important books. First, we're missing the Dublin Saga. And second, we're missing Brian Boru's saga. Why is this so important? Well, not only does it give us an interpretation of events that do happen during the Viking Age, but most importantly, it gives us writing and it shows us what language the Irish Vikings, the Hiberno Scandinavians, were speaking. Were they, because there's a lot of debates and arguments to kick off. Were they speaking Norse? Were they speaking Gaelic? Was it in between? And that causes a lot of debates and arguments because if we could find those missing sagas, we could see from a scale of 1 to 10 how Irish or Norse the Hiberno Scandinavians were. What the hell are you guys all yapping about? Maybe a little. Oh yeah. So Mihal's starting arguments there in the comments section. People on Facebook say things you think. Jesus Christ, Mihal, whip. Starting problems in my bloody channel, you lunatic. Right, so I want to just quickly get a map. I thought I had a map there on Flanshina's Ireland. Give us a second there. Did I not have that? Give us a second there. I thought I downloaded that map. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe it's the wrong type. I'll try this one. Maybe I didn't. Okay. Just to give you an idea. It's very slow this morning, the algorithm, by the looks of it. I thought the algorithm would do much better. Boom! Right. So we can see. It'd be handy if I had a stick or something. There's so much, if they ever asked me, like, what would I love to bring into this? It'd be like a ruler or a stick, so I could point out. But if you go over to Dublin, you can easily see Dublin is just another faction. Dublin has control of the Isle of Man, and it's got control over Dublin itself, right? And in this period, what was it? Broder Emer, Broder Mac Emer, who was the son of Ivor the Boneless. He was under Flanshina, had given tribute to Flanshina, and he spent most of his time at war with Halfdan Ragnarsson, who was the brother of Ivor the Boneless, allegedly. Okay, and even his title of Halfdan Ragnarsson, which the Danish sagas give to him, His surname, Ragnarsson, is also massively debated as well. But to simplify the conversation, we'll refer to him as Halfdan Ragnarsson. And Halfdan Ragnarsson was king of Northumberland. He invades into Ireland to take over Ireland and is completely battered by the Irish with the Irish Vikings. So a combination of the Gaelic and the Irish Vikings beat Halfdan Ragnarsson and his invading force. So the Danish Vikings are beaten around 870. So around that period, Halfdan Ragnarsson is killed by Broder Mac Emer, which is great because then we have an official kind of Irish Viking dynasty in Ireland, which is under Clan Coleman with Flan Sinna in charge. And Flan Sinna eventually becomes King of Ireland at that point, being able to subjugate pretty much all the men of Ireland. And in I'm sure it's the Annals of Ulster, he's got this big, massive, I'm sure I had it here. I'm sure this is in the Annals of Ulster, but I'm up for correction. There we go. He puts in Flan over Ireland. So you can see that, Flan over Ireland. And that's what Flan Sinna puts in around, what period was that? I'm sure it's around 870, 880. So around that period. Bum, bum, bum. And he also, Flan Sinna, another thing Flan Sinna does as well is start erecting high crosses around the, what was it, Clonmacnoise as well, to really pin down his control at the time and have him identified as King of the Irish around 870, 880. Okay? Okay. However, after the death of Flan Sinna, Noel Glundov, he becomes High King of the Enel at that point. After the death of Flan Sinna, he becomes High King, and he's mostly in control of the Brown territory there. Okay, there's a lot of fighting and scruffling between themselves, but regardless, around 902 to around 918. Previously, Flan Sinna had kicked out a good few Irish Vikings out of the. My black cat legit disconnected. Poor Phil went. Oh yeah, yeah. That happened the other day as well. It was, what was it? I don't know what the hell was going on between YouTube. YouTube decided to boot me out while I was doing a live stream the other day. Mm. The crosses at Clonmacnoise were originally timber. Maybe. There's a lot of stone effigy ones in there as well. Let's pop over to this one there. Clonmacnoise. But regardless, after the death of Flan Sinna, Niall Glundov takes over the High Kingship of Ireland, and he's mostly in control of the Enale territories in Brown. And he fails to get the cattle tribute of the other parts of Ireland compared to Flan Sinna. Flan Sinna was able to get the cattle tribute of pretty much all of Ireland and was successfully being able to being recognized as King of Ireland, as he recognizes himself Flan over Ireland by around 870 to 880. Niall Glundov fails to do that. And another problem as well is that previously Flan Sinna had kicked out the nobles of Dublin. The Irish Vikings of Dublin were kicked out. Not all of the Hiberno Scandinavians were kicked out. That's really important to note. While doing archaeological research into the area, there is no archaeological evidence that the Hiberno Scandinavians were kicked out of Dublin. So the majority of the Hiberno Scandinavians stayed in Dublin, but the nobles, especially the Emer dynasty, were booted out. They come back, and they are at this stage Hiberno Scandinavians. They're not Norwegians, so they are Irish Vikings, from our understanding. and they return around 915, 917, 918. Okay, and from there they successfully take over Waterford, Dublin, and then Ragnar Emer, he returns back to York, and this is what starts the sort of Irish Viking Anglo-Saxon war. Okay. Where's my map? Right. So you can see Dublin there in orange. You can see them occupying the Isle of Man as well, and then pushing over to England. And from there, they start to push over. And Ragnar Emer, he does capture York. And they refer to York as Jorvik, okay, which is Norse. And you can see why this whole debate kicks off of, well, how Irish were they, you know? They definitely were Hiberno Scandinavia, even if you look at the archaeological evidence. They're wearing they're wearing a mixture of Hiberno Scandinavian clothing. And they're dressing very similar to the Irish, who at this stage are taking on that kind of Scandinavian fashion wave as well. So it's definitely more of a Hiberno Scandinavian clothing rather than a Norwegian clothing. So we're definitely dealing with kind of Hiberno Scandinavians for sure, a mixture of both Irish and Scandinavians kind of blurred together to be their own people. And in the sources, especially to do with Gerald of Wales, they're referred to as Ustmen, men of the east of Ireland, Ustmen. And Ragnar Emer, who returns back to England, goes over and captures Jorvik. And on the other hand, because Niall Glundov, who at the time is High King of Ireland, sees this as a rebellion, he raises the forces of the men of Ireland to march on Dublin to kick out the Emer again, the nobles again, the Irish Viking nobles to kick them out again. And instead, Sihtric Emer's based in Dublin. Now, Sihtric Emer is possibly one of the greatest Irish Vikings, one of the greatest men of Dublin of all time. Not only does he go on this amazing winning and building great administration inside of Dublin, but he also does the same in York as well. So he ends up becoming an amazing leader in both York and Dublin. I don't think Sihtric Emer, I definitely do not think Sihtric Emer woke up that day and thought to himself, I'm going to literally wipe out the entire kingship of Ireland. But that's what he ends up doing. At the Battle of Isle Bridge in 918, he ends up placing his forces in a defensive line, is outnumbered by the Irish. And yet, with his Irish Viking forces, his Hiberno Scandinavian forces, is able to defend Dublin from the Irish, what was it, the Gaelic, the native Gaelic, and ends up winning the Battle of Isle Bridge in 918. So in 918, he ends up winning the Battle of Isle Bridge, pretty much wiping out the main nobility of Ireland. This allows Clan Coleman, led by Donogh Dunn, to seize the High Kingship of Ireland. Now, it's not that simple. Donogh Dunn is not favoured amongst even what's left over of the Irish nobility inside of Ireland. But the main roof of Ireland at the time, after the Battle of Isle Bridge, it's wiped. It's completely wiped out. So Donogh Dunn starts to seize power. He starts to wipe out his rivals inside of Ireland. Okay. The Irish Vikings now can focus on fighting while Donogh Dunn is seizing power inside of Ireland, right? Which is inside of Meath, which is, the centre of Ireland, in Clonmacnoise. At the same time, Sihtric Emer, Ragnar continues the war against the Anglo-Saxons, expands out and starts capturing land over in England. Sihtric Emer, or is it Ragnar eventually passes away. Sihtric Emer goes over to England, and you have these kind of Hiberno Scandinavians fighting not just against the Anglo-Saxons, but also he's fighting against the Danes and the Norwegians. So at this point, you are dealing with Hiberno-Scandinavians that are not just fighting against Anglo-Saxons, but they're also fighting against Norwegians. Later on, especially against the likes of Eric Bloodaxe and other Danish leaders. Okay, so and also Anglo Danes as well. So these Hiberno Scandinavians are seen as the worst of the worst, the most evil, but they're seen different, not just in the annals of the time, because if we read stories like Olaf, at the same time, you have the story of Olaf the Peacock. So while all this is going on, you have Olaf the Peacock, who is in Iceland at the time. We were actually talking about his story the other day, but his story kicks off at this time. His mother most likely probably captured around this time. She was most likely a princess from the Enel, captured by the Irish Vikings, most likely, and then sold to the Norwegians. And she ends up in Iceland. Did I highlight the picture? There's stuff missing from this, I'm sure, because I'm sure I had more stuff up yesterday. But Olaf the Peacock, his mother is kidnapped, sent over to Norway, and then sold to a man in Iceland who gets her pregnant. And then he finds out that she is an Irish princess, gives her own land, and she dresses him up. The story highlights the fact that he's dressed up as an Irish Viking, different to the Norwegians. Okay, so in this story, it highlights the differences between the Irish Vikings, the Hiberno Scandinavians, the men of Dublin, and the differences between the Norwegians. Okay, so Olaf the Peacock, who speaks Irish, by the way, by his mother. His mother teaches him Irish, so he learns how to speak Irish. And his mother, Olaf the Peacock's father, an Icelander, finds out that she is a Icelandic noble, sorry, an Irish noble, gives her own land. She becomes a successful landowner because she's very much educated in administration from Clonmacnoise, most likely. And she tells Olaf the Peacock to return back to Ireland to go and find their family and stuff. He goes back to Ireland, finds the Enel. The Enel at the time under Donegal are expanding way out. At this point in the story, there's a bit of confusion under the word Ree. The word Ree is kind of used as the king of the Irish, but his father's kind of not found. I assume there's a bit of confusion under the likes of a local king and high kingship, especially under the understanding of the Icelanders, because the Icelanders understand that all of the Peacock's father was High King of Ireland. But I don't think that's the case because the High King of Ireland at the time is Donegal. And Donegal now, he's completely wiping out a lot of the noble classes and kind of building up his own system inside of Ireland at the time. That's what's happening in Ireland. And so Olaf the Peacock, he returns back to Ireland while this is going on, from my understanding. And from there, his own father promises him land. And because, Donegal and most likely his father, who I believe is a lesser noble, could be maybe King of Ireland. Maybe it's just a big, massive mistranslation. I'm not sure. But regardless, Olaf the Peacock ends up, his father tries to offer him, regardless if his father is High King of Ireland or a lesser noble. Anyway, regardless, in the story of Olaf the Peacock, his father offers him land, and he ends up rejecting it ultimately. And him and his war band go back to Iceland. Okay, at the end of the story, and there's way more about him marrying a local Icelander girl, so on and so forth. Right. Not all these first. The guy up on the top headpiece reminds me of an American Indian. Oh, the Icelander? Possibly. That could be what the artist is doing because of the fact that Iceland is right next to Vinland. I know officially, we're meant to wait to 1000 AD for Icelanders to go over to Finland, but there was probably already interaction in real life between Iceland and Finland, modern day America, well, Canada anyway, and Newfoundland. There seems to be a lot of indication that the Irish from around the 6th century were already going up in real life, were already going up to Iceland or Greenland and Newfoundland. So maybe the artist is trying to indicate that here, that the Icelanders are kind of already slipping into Finland. Um, in real life, it probably is the case. I know the sagas romanticize it and are very much like, well, in 1000 AD, that's when you've got the likes of Eric the Red and all them boys moving into Greenland and Finland, so on and so forth. But the reality is, they were probably already poking away at those areas, and there was probably rumors and stuff of those areas being occupied by Native Americans and stuff. Um, yeah, so it probably is. Why was he called Peacock? The reason why he was called Peacock is because so his mother used to dress. His mother was a successful landowner in Iceland because she was so switched on with administration because of her education at Clonmacnoise. Noise. So she could afford to dress all off very well as a child. She also had a lot of silk and her own father's goods, like her own father's knife and stuff, which was also really dressed up and decorated very well. So she used to give her son Hiberno Scandinavian knives and silk and stuff to wrap around him. So he was dressed really well in Irish stuff. And also, she probably, when going down to buy stuff, used to, and she would have also had, when she was making clothing and stuff, would have known the Irish patterns and stuff. So even if she went down to buy some silk or linen or whatever, she would have naturally done the fancy kind of, as we would call, kind of Celtic knots and stuff, the type of knots and stuff that you would see in the Book of Kells. Because of her education, she would have been able to do all that kind of stuff. And so she would have dressed up all of very fancy. So he ends up getting the name Peacock because he's dressed so fancy and noble when he was a child. Because that's about the time when he's a little child, she is desperately trying to teach him Irish and she gets caught teaching him in Irish. And so the father ends up finding out that she's an Irish noble. And so he gives her own land and she ends up becoming very prosperous because of it. So because he's dressed up so well, that's why he's referred to as all of the peacock. Fascinating stuff, as you would say. Ba, 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 ba. Regardless, while all that stuff is going on, Citric is at war with the Anglo-Saxons. In particular, there ends up becoming a stalemate between the Anglo-Saxons and the men of Dublin, the Hiberno Scandinavians, the Ustmen, the Norse Gael. And in that, what is the King of England at the time? My brain is freezing up. King of, well, the King of Wessex, I suppose. Not sure if it should be King of England or Wessex. Because I know at this point, although they don't unify England for ages, they start using the title King of England for a while. Since the period of Alfred the Great. Sometimes when you look at this list, let me have a quick gawk at that list. And I'll pop back over here. King of England list. Because I'm sure they start the King of England list from Alfred the Great. What's funny is that they still continue the King of England list today, although it's mostly King of Britain now these days. Yeah, it's so funny. They start the list of the King of England from Alfred the Great, House of Wessex, and it's like these people never became kings. Anyway, regardless. Yeah, he's at war. Alfred the Great is 886 to 899. Then we have Edward the Elder. Yeah, so it's Edward the Elder gets into a stalemate with Citric y Emer and recognizes Citric y Emer's claim over this whole yellow side. But I think Citric has to pay some form of tribute, perhaps, over to um, what was it, Edward? It's never really explained, but there is some form of. But then the war is constantly on and off as well. And Citric, allegedly, what Citric is, producing his own coins inside of York, okay? And as part of that peace agreement between the two, and one of the problems about this as well, I think it started with Elton. Yeah, like that's the first time you have somebody who identifying themselves as the King of England. And even on top of that, that's quite funny as well. I'll talk about that in a bit, actually, why I find Etelstan's reign a bit funny compared to the English that, make it try to define itself as much as possible. Yeah, the term was used. It was definitely used by Etelstan's period anyway. I think Alfred the Great inside his book starts to have the basis of this more unified Anglo-Saxon identity, but I don't think he ever became King of England. But if you look at the list, they start their list dirtily with Alfred the Great, although he was never King of England. Like that's over on Wikipedia. If you head over to Wikipedia, lists of English monarchs, they start off for Alfred the Great sneakily, 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 sneakily. Regardless, Citric Emer gets into a stalemate with Edward the Elder, and he ends up marrying the daughter to Edward the Elder, which is a very funny relationship. At this point, by the way, it needs to be noted that Citric Emer is insular Christian. So, for the most part, he does believe in God and he does support Jesus Christ. But the Irish Vikings, the Hiberno Scandinavians, who are kind of insular Christians, Celtic Christians, if you want to call them, because of their time in Ireland, have a very funny interpretation of what was it, God and stuff. Because if you look at Dublin, the way Dublin is built, we were saying about this the other day. You have Christ Church in the middle, and then the city is built around it, right? So even in Dublin itself, it's very, very, very funny. You know, this whole idea of Christ in the middle. But at the same time, they're also putting up flags of Odin. So they're also still worshipping Odin. And in England, the Hiberno Scandinavians are also putting up crosses and, Jesus Christ crosses, but it's full of, what was it called? Scandinavian gods and deities and stuff like Odin, Loki, Thor. Like they're full of those effigies and images all over it. So for being Christians, they're kind of funny. And to the Anglo Saxons, who were very Roman Christian, this is just pure heresy to them. And so Citric, as part of this agreement with Edward the Elder, he has to get baptized. And now he's supposed to be Roman Christian. So he gets baptized from being kind of pagan, instead of Christian, to now being Roman Christian. But he completely rejects this Roman Christian identity from the get go, which really annoys his wife because his wife is radically Roman Christian. She envisions this Hiberno Scandinavian Roman Christian realm, which Citric Emer completely rejects. So it's a very, very funny relationship. And they do not get along whatsoever, the two of them. So eventually, she leaves her husband and joins a nunnery. It's a very failed relationship between the two of them. And if I just pop over to the comment section there, du- 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 du. Where am I? Where am I? Where am I? Du- 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 du. I think as stand the term is used. How are the classes identified in these days, like the rich and the poor, the middle class? The Hiberno Scandinavians are funny because the Hiberno Scandinavians are a part of the Irish world, but at the same time, they're also, city people as well. So they're kind of in between a kind of city Scandinavian world and an Irish kind of king group clan world, so they're between the two. Of course, there is nobles amongst them and there is classes, but I really don't know if there's any beggars or poor people. There probably was because we're dealing with a coinage society outside the walls of, and it's funny because it's not until Citrix Silkenbeard pops in around 980 that you do have proper identities and money is properly put together. The thing is, Jim, it's difficult because this thing is in the middle of kind of its birthing process. You know, how this whole class system works. I don't think anybody was a beggar at Dublin at this point because there was plenty of stuff to be doing compared to when we go into 12th century Ireland, where there probably was most likely beggars around Dublin and stuff. So I think people put into the class of, you know, and they were blurring between, especially very, very blurry between the clans and the clans themselves. Like the Kerns, like it's very difficult to find for me doing my research. And even when I was reading, I was in university, and it was who was it? Oh my god, it was Professor. Oh my god, his name is somewhere at the Celtic Heroic Age. But regardless, one of the professors in University College of Cork, he was pointing out that you have Kerns, for example, who are meant to be, you know, just going cattle raiding and stuff. And then the next minute, they just jump on a boat and go a Viking, you know? So, what I'm trying to say there, Jim, is that everything's very blurry at this point because it's kind of in this whole Burton process going between the old clan system in Ireland, the Tuat system that had been around for since 550 all the way up to around the 11th century, to kind of going between, going into this kind of high Middle Ages, kind of this bastard feudalism that you can start to see appear inside of Dublin. So to be honest with you, Jim, I think it's just in between this kind of clan king group system, which does have hierarchy in it, but is sort of not the same as what you see with the bastard feudalism. I know it's difficult to kind of talk about, but it's a very funny subject because in itself it's such a bloody blur at this point. Like um after so I would say most people except for slaves, I keep forgetting that as well, there is slaves. So I suppose poor people would be replaced by slaves, Jim, to be honest with you. So I suppose to really simplify it, this is insanely simplified, by the way, you would have the slaves at the bottom, then you kind of have the warrior working class in the middle, and then the merchants and the poets and everyone of those hierarchy, and then you'd have more of the upper noble class, and then eventually you'd have the local king, and then on top of him again you'd have the high king in Clonmacnoise, who sometimes, you know, as you know yourself, the king of Dublin was not paying his tribute to the high king, which would cause clashing between the two. Okay. Bum, bum, bum. After the big battle in, yeah, that's basically where we have to go headed now. When is the Battle of Banborough in around 937 between the men of Dublin, the Irish Vikings, and the Anglo-Saxons. Would you say there were more? Mm, yeah, I would say there's more equal classing going on in Ireland than there is in England, just because it's more of a kind of king group family classes. Like you were put into your clan, your family, and those families then all kind of blurred in together as well. So there is within these kind of clans, there is a structure of hierarchy there, but it's not a case of, you know, one family was more poor, more rich to the other to the extreme that you'd see in England, especially within the settlements and stuff, from my understanding. But that process is starting to appear in Dublin to a certain degree, you know, as we go into the high Middle Ages. So in this period, it's more dominated by kind of, as you were saying there, clans, and as it is actually referred to as the Tuat, where most people are staying in farmsteads. Like most people, like you do have a main assembly area. I'm sure some of these pictures got deleted. Oh yeah, there. So This is kind of the main assembly area, which is a monastic settlement where people come on Sundays, and then the major assembly period. So all the clans would meet up here to do assembly, where they would um, do judging and law. Basically, anyone that broke the laws and stuff would be judged here for their various punishments. Most likely, most of the time, they were paying tribute to a clan that they had pissed off, a tuat that they had pissed off, as you would say in Irish. So in Irish, it's a tuat. And basically, to simplify it, you'd call it a clan. Okay, so you'd pay your tribute to a clan that you had pissed off, most likely because life needed to go on. So you pay your cattle tribute if you pissed off a clan. So everybody would come here to assembly, and then the various clans, the Tuatha, would then organize what they were doing. They would do fairs, they would do games, they would have different celebrations at the assemblies. Oh, and they would do mass, of course, because in the middle of this is a church in the monastic settlement. And then after the assembly was over, they would go back to their own farmstead ring fort. So every clan, every family had their own farmstead ring fort. Okay. And there were thousands and thousands of these all over Ireland. So instead of having a main place where they were living after 550, everyone goes into the clan system, the Tuatha system, after 550. So originally, you would have had those big, massive Bronze Age, Iron Age um, settlements. So one of these. So these are before 550. After 550, then everybody goes into monastic settlements and farmstead ring forts. So everybody goes into this kind of clan system that you'd see in Ireland after 550, under the period of what was it? David McCurville. So Diarmaid McCurville around 550 starts off this kind of Tuatha kind of clan system in Ireland. Sounds like where I would have been hanging out most of the time. Oh, a nice little farmstead ring fort. Oh, I entire history. Yeah, yeah, pretty much. Everything's a lie. Everything's fake. Why explains why Gerald of Wales kept saying all the Irish did was lay about doing nothing. Well, I'm not saying anything about Gerald of Wales. You should bitch about Gerald Wells all day. Where was I? Oh yeah, Wayne wanted me to continue the old fake history. Most of the battles never happened. Depends. We're actually going to go on to a battle now. Battle of Bamborough. And around 937. Do I have a photo of it here? I don't know. What is the Battle of Bamborough? Is a good question. Let me see if I have a picture. Do I have any pictures or anything of Bamborough? If not, then take it. Bambro in 937. Let me quickly type it in there. Here we go. Right, it's handy to have Wikipedia. I can look up specifically who fought in that one. Ethelstan, King Ethelstan, your man who was meant to unify Ireland. So, of course, the Irish at this point around 920 up to around 936, the Hiberno-Scandinavians who were located in York. They've captured York, they've captured the north of England, and they're making loads of money because most of their trade is going from Scandinavia straight into York, the north of England, and then over to Dublin, and then from Dublin down into the Mediterranean Sea of Iberian Peninsula, modern day Spain and Portugal, and then from there into the Mediterranean Sea. And then the other way around from Scandinavia, going down to the Kiev, modern day Ukraine, going down into modern day Turkey, Istanbul, Constantinople, and then from there over to Baghdad. So and that's then connected into the Silk Road. Silk Road at this period is the golden age is starting to dip at this point, but still, this is still a major golden age over in Beijing. So they're making loads of money. Even in Dublin at this point, we can see silk finds starting to pop up. We have various bits and bobs of silk headpieces and also silk clothing starting to appear in the Annals of Ulster as well. The Annals of Ulster describe the men of Dublin going into battle dressed in silk. So this is kind of, as Claire Downham has pointed out, and she's still kind of putting together the evidence for it last time I checked, highlights the fact that this is an economic golden age in Ireland. And Donegal Dunn at this point as well, he's gone back on his feet again. He's, what was it, subjugated the majority of the Tuat in Ireland and goes into Dublin and smashes Dublin. He completely wrecks up Dublin on purpose. The reason why he goes in there and wrecks up Dublin is because he wants to show everybody that he is the man. He is the High King of Ireland. He is the one that's in charge. Okay? And Donegal Dunn gets recognised as king of the Gaelic and the Ustman, the Foreign, the Gaul Gael. So, without a shadow of a doubt at this point, Donegal Dunn is king of the Irish. Okay? And Donegal Dunn does that by parade. He goes into Dublin, makes a show of Olaf III, who's king of Dublin at this point, and from there, strangely enough, Ethelstan is able to also go up to York, and he captures York away from what was it called, the men of Dublin. Now, at this point now, Donegal Dunn, once Donegal Dunn subjugates Dublin, Dublin is under the control of Donegal Dunn. But Donegal Dunn doesn't want the Irish Vikings to lose York. Okay, so that's important. Remember, he's a vassal of, what was it, Olaf III, King of Dublin, is a vassal to Donegal Dunn. So, of course, Donegal Dunn wants him to do well. So, that's important because what happens next is Ethelstan, the King of England, well, the King of Wessex, is able to march up to York, capture York, and he's also able to force the King of the Scots into subjugation, pay tribute to him, and also subjugate the men of Wales as well, okay? So Ethelstan is getting a bit too powerful. And this is where it gets a bit strange, but most likely it's because he has the support of Donegal Dunn. Out of nowhere, according to the Annals of Ulster, Olaf III is able to raise a military force of 7,000 men and march into England. Okay, so that's pretty important. Bum, 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 bum. Where am I with these comments? How can I, when all the records were destroyed? We have the Annals of Ulster. And we have the annals, so it's not too bad. The overall manuscripts and archaeology evidence says so. Has there been a troll? How can we say they never happened if their records were destroyed? Sure, I made it up, didn't I? Discuss larger human fossil finds everywhere. Let's all believe in dinosaurs instead of hush hush. What? Are we talking about dinosaurs now? What's going on in the comment section? Normans won't claim anything in the next campaign of Crusader Kings 2. Attempted giving total. What is going on in the comment section? Okay. Everybody's having fun in the old comment section. Okay, where was I? Oh, the Battle of Bamborough in 937, fought between Olaf III and Athelstan, who is now declared he is the king of the Anglo-Saxons, the king of England. It's a battle that we really should have won. It turns into this really horrible grind and I think the numbers for it are absolutely crazy. Some people reckon there were about 10,000 on both sides. It's considered Britain's most biggest, bloodiest battle of all time because of the fact that we have forces from the men of Ireland, men of Scotland, the men of Wales, and the men of England. So the Battle of Bamborough in 937 is considered Britain and Ireland's biggest battle of all time. We haven't seen a battle this big since the Golden Age of Ireland. Coming to around the 7th century, during the Golden Age of Ireland, there's two huge battles that happen up around the north of Ireland and also up and around the north of England that just completely escalate out of hands between the Nael and the King of Northumberland. Okay, so there hasn't been a battle this big for quite some time, but now the Battle of Bamborough happens. And the reason this is really, really important because the Irish Vikings, the Hiberno Scandinavians, are trying to continue their dominance both in Britain and Ireland. And so they need to hold on to York so they can control that really important trade network going to Scandinavia. But Athelstan wants to cut that. And on top of that, as well, he wants to pretty much dominate England at this point. Okay. So this battle really, really, really is exceptionally important. Also, Athelstan has obviously produced a whole load of enemies up in modern day Scotland against the various kings that are up in there. Stratton Clyde is one of their also major rivals as well. Scotland, Stratton and Clyde, you can see that in blue as well. And then Alba is in there as well. How is it possible the English managed to unite their lands under one crown but not Ireland? Brian Brew tried, but it seems I think you're looking at it in the wrong way because at this point Ireland is pretty much into the control of Donegal. Ireland didn't have English centralization, but they did have the king group system in Ireland, which was hostages. And this is one of the problems as well, is a lot of people are looking at it from the point of centralization. So you're asking, why isn't Ireland like England? Why doesn't Ireland have centralization? And the reason for that is at this point, Ireland is ran in the king group system. So all of the Tuat and the Tuat are connected together through fosterage, hostages, and marriage alliances, which connects all the king groups together. So although the king groups do have seasonal fighting amongst each other, cattle raiding, for the most part, especially under the control of Donegal, going into the Battle of Bamborough, most of these, especially Dublin is subjugated, Munster is subjugated, the large parts of Ireland at this point is subjugated under Donegal. So many of these factions are going to the assemblies. By the time we get up to 937, the majority of the Tuatha, the clans of Ireland, are going to Donegal's assembly. So for the most part, maybe there's a few clans who are not going to Donegal's assembly, but for the most part, the majority of the clans of Ireland are going to Donegal's assembly. But it is true, Ireland is not England at this point, and Ireland is not centralized the way England is from around, I suppose, around. When is it? Oh yeah, 1094, isn't it? Where they're able to kind of pin down a form of centralization. But as you know yourself, it's not completely centralized until we get up to around, I suppose, Henry the Third's period is when you start to see proper. Um, but even on top of that, it's very debated because of all those barons. They're constantly rebelling. So even on top of that, it is very debated if England is centralized in the 13th century. I suppose the period of the 14th century is when we start to see somewhat centralization in England. You think Ireland could have centralized at one point? I'm not even a huge fan of centralization, to be honest with you. I do love the king group system, to be honest with you. And I think that's what causes Ireland to be unique in itself. Um, so what happened? The thing is, as well, is that you need to take note of is that what the Norman invasion was a rebellion against. So you have Diarmid MacMora, who. So Ireland has just come out of one civil war. The Norman invasion starts off on a civil war between the MacLachlan's and the O'Connors. So the MacLachlan's see themselves as the rightful High Kings of Ireland. And so they rebel against the O'Connors to seize that kingship of Ireland at the time. However, they fail to do so. And one of the lesser nobles who are on the poor receiving side of that is Diarmaid MacMorra. And so Diarmaid MacMorra goes to England to get support from the Normans. And then it kind of escalates out of hand from there. So even if Ireland had a different system of ruling, let it be under the king group system, the Tuat system, or centralized system, as in the kind of feudalism that we know today, that would have happened regardless anyway. England under or I wouldn't say even say England at the time. I would say the Anjou Empire would have been pulled into Irish politics regardless anyway, because of the fact that it was a lesser noble that was supposed to be under the O'Connors' kingship, that had brought these Norman mercenaries over to Ireland, that was led by Strongbow. Okay, Strongbow was seen as a threat to Henry II. So Henry II was pulled into the politics happening to Ireland, and that would have happened regardless if Ireland was centralized or not centralized, in my opinion. Um, but it is when it comes down to the problems of the Tuat system. I think that problem does start to appear in the 13th century under King Brian O'Neill. So I'm not turning around and saying that the King group system, the Tuat system, is the be all and end all. It was perfect in the early medieval period under the ENL, but when you go into the High Middle Ages and the late medieval period, there's a lot of growing pains there till eventually Ireland starts to identify itself as more of a republic under its, whatever the hell. Like even today, massive growing pains happening in Ireland right now. So I wouldn't even say our growing pains have even finished yet. And we'll see what happens going into 2030. So I wouldn't even say our growing pains in Ireland is even finished yet. But regardless, I do believe at this point, going into 937 and the Battle of Bamborough, I don't think there was anything wrong with Ireland at this point, especially with the King group system. If we're going at the Annals of Ulster, the men of Dublin are able to raise in Dublin a force of 7,000 men. I do massively believe, like, that's 7,000. Where the hell are they getting that 7,000 for? And they're subjugated under Donegal Dunn. Donegal Dunn had a lot of gain by taking back and defending York. Okay, so I do believe at this, Olaf the Third, King of Dublin, was supported by the High King of Ireland, Donegal Dunn, going into the Battle of Bamborough. Do you think the networks of kingship were more stable than the feudal relationship? No, not going into the 13th century. So, right now, in the early medieval period, I do think it's a system that does work. Okay, so I think it's really great in the early medieval period when you're dealing with war bands, and clans, and all that stuff, and it's all connected together through marriage alliance, fosterage, and adoption. Okay, no, sorry, not adoption, marriage alliance, fosterage, and hostages. Yeah, that's the one. So I do think it's working grand right now, but when we go into the High Middle Ages and the late medieval period, there's huge problems there, and we can see that in Brian O'Neill, the last King of Ireland's revolt in around 1260, around 1257 to around 1262, when you suddenly have clans that are like, nah, I'm not playing ball. Like, they need to push the English out of Ireland. And Brian O'Neill fails to do so. And he's not even killed by the English. He's killed by his own nobles, his own Gaelic nobles. So there's definitely a problem there. And as Michal has pointed out as well, even going into the late medieval period, there seems to be massive pain, you know, problems with the king group system, even in the late medieval period. But you could say that about every system, that there's a lot of growing pains there. because like even if in England we like to romanticize the centralization of feudalism inside of England, going into the Battle of Agincourt, Henry V, England is in bits going into the Battle of Agincourt. If Henry V hadn't won the Battle of Agincourt, England would have completely collapsed. North of England is constant rebelling against Henry V. Wales is 100% anti Henry V, and Scotland is ready to completely flood England. Even his nobles inside of the London court are literally buying their time to completely usurp Henry V. So when he goes into the Battle of Agincourt, that's a battle Henry V has to win. You know, so even in England, the centralization of feudalism isn't perfect. You know, and a lot of people, even maybe in the comment section, would disagree that was it even centralization in England itself at the time. A lot of growing pains there, you know, and you have those growing pains all the way up to the 1800s, just going into the British Empire. And it's not until Duke Wellington pops in that you can say, well, now this system, and it's not even the same medieval system, you know, but it's at that point you could say, now we're starting to see the system somewhat work, but not for the poor. Like during the 1800s, the poor are the ones being, you know, trodden on, crushed, and in Ireland, completely crushed to death, as there's no food in Ireland, you know. It's definitely not a system that works great, you know, for sure. But it works for the rich at that point, you know. So if you want to say that the system only really works going into the 1800s, then, you know, debatable. Very interesting conversation for sure. But when it comes down to the whole clan and king group system, I would only say it works really good in the early medieval period. But then once the roof has fallen down, and you know, you could turn around and say Brian Brew is so amazing, is so great, but he did do what was going to inevitably happen anyway. He destroyed the roof that was early medieval Ireland's kind of king group system. He destroyed the roof of that by destroying the main monarchy, which was the Nail. He removed that roof. The system was now collapsing. Ba, 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 ba. Where was I with these comments? Do you think the network is stable? Mercier wins chat today. The kingship system reminds me of how Israel portrayed the Bible. I wouldn't know. It's definitely out of my field of expertise for sure. Not exactly saying perhaps just close. It gives me perhaps. It's definitely like the whole Israel and all that kind of stuff is definitely out of my field of expertise, so I couldn't really say that for sure. This because a lot of our genetics were edited to look like we are having. Da, 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 da. Drunken horn. Was that practice in early medieval Ireland? Brian Brew and his sons, grandsons never died at the Battle of Clontarf. Sure, I just covered that and actually my short. Head over to my short. I literally about an hour ago posted up a short expanding on what happens next after the death of Brian Brew. But why does everyone believe all of his sons are dead? Dunica MacBreen is still alive after the Battle of Clontarf. Probably not. I don't think the Irish were too happy with one dynasty dominating the whole of Ireland at the time. The Nail dynasty, which was the roof of Ireland, the problem is once the Nail are gone, well, Mael Shocknell is taken out of it, and you have the rights likes of Donogh MacBreen, and you also have the likes of Diarmid MacMail no more, kind of doing their own thing at that point, and then even being recognised as the kings of Ireland by the papacy. I think that's the point. And the problem is the inevitability of the roof falling down going into the high Middle Ages. It's really, the world was changing, you know, when you really look at it, because it's not only the problems of the different families looking to usurp the Enels, but it was also the whole reforming of the church and everything. Like the system was gone, you know, the king group system, the Irish, the clan system, everything absolutely amazing and brilliant in the early medieval period when you're dealing with war bands. And all these groups being glued together through fosterage, hostage, so on and so forth. So you can see why Ireland was able to go into an era, golden age of saints and scholars, you know, and then going into the golden age, an economic golden age in Dublin. You can see why Ireland had the ability to do that. The problem is going into high Middle Ages is that system no longer seems to function, especially under, like, it really does completely collapse under Brian O'Neill in 1250. In 1250, that's it. That system is whacked. It's completely gone at that point. And what you end up happening is this weird bastard feudalism inside of Ireland that is somewhat like the German system inside of the Holy Roman Empire. The only difference is that the Holy Roman Empire somewhat functions in the High Middle Ages and the late medieval period, and even at times under the likes of Frederick II, Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire, works absolutely phenomenal. But you know, there's this weird thing of like trying to run. The Irish are trying to run, and they've got this kind of boulder of a thing stuck onto the left leg, which is really pulling them back, and that's kind of this early medieval king group system. And it's not until we get into the late medieval period, with the likes of the Fitzgeralds and the Irish Parliament and stuff, that the engine starts to work again. But during the High Middle Ages, huge problems there, But then as we go into the late medieval period, and you have the likes of the Fitzgeralds who start to reform Ireland again, especially with the coin and levy system reintroduced into Ireland, that you see the clan system starting to work again in the 15th century. The problem is that at that point we have other realms starting to function, especially Scotland and England, starting to go work against the realm of Ireland. So it never reaches the same peak. It's working again. In the 15th century, Ireland is up and function again. There's a lot of magnificent stuff that happens in 15th century Ireland under the clans, but it never reaches the same peak it did during the early medieval period. Does it have the same golden age as we see with the Saints and Scholars in Clonmacnoise between 550 to 793? And it doesn't have the same economic golden age in Dublin that we see between around, let's say, 70 up to around somewhere around 830. Sorry, 1030. 1030. Bum, 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 bum. Where are we? With respect, I day that as the day. We went discussion battles, conspiracy theories on Ireland's centralization. Love this plot twist. Well, it all fits in to today's chat, which is 10th century Ireland. Because 10th century Ireland is the peak of this economic golden age in Dublin. Under with the High Kingship of Donegal really dominating the politics that's happening at the time. Donegal was a pretty successful High King of Ireland, and we don't talk about him enough. And it's funny because when you start the conversation, you came very alien into it. Constantly asking the questions a lot of people are wondering is why centralization isn't in Ireland, and would have Ireland been more successful under centralization? And I think in the early medieval period, I don't think Ireland would have been successful at all under any form of centralization. I think the king group system really functioned amazingly during the period of Donegal around 937. The reason why they didn't succeed in 837 is down to tactics happening on the field of battle at that day. The men of Dublin could have won that battle, the Battle of Bamborough, and then we would have been looking at a completely different world after the Battle of Bamborough if the men of Dublin had become victorious. England would not exist. If the Battle of Bamborough had led to an Irish Viking victory with their Scottish allies and also Briton allies with the men of Strathclyde, you would have been looking at a completely different world. No, England would have never existed if that was the case. What was the most common? Oh, it was so coinage doesn't really become a thing. Was the most common currency, cattle or coin inside of Ireland itself. So we have to look at this as external and internal. And coins don't become a thing in Dublin until after the Battle of Clontarf. Around when is coinage? It's under Citric Silken Bird. But just to get to the point, at this Pacific time, so around it's around 10:30 or around 10:20 that coins become a thing, right, in Dublin. So at this specific point, we're gonna have to take a step back and look at it more as external and internal. Inside of Ireland itself, internally with the politics, cattle is the main currency in Ireland. And most people would, as a war-bound society, would not respect silver to the same status as cattle because you cannot eat silver. Okay, but but it's still important. People, if you got a hold of silver or raided silver, they would give it over to the head of the clan, or as you would say, the Ri or I Fada, which directly translates over to king, but pretty much would be the equivalent of a lord. Okay, well, at least at the level of an earl, perhaps, probably even less. Right, so it's one of the major noble classes is Ri, directly translated by king. But anyway, regardless, it would be the equivalent of the head of the clan, right? So if you got a hold of silver, you'd hand that over to the head of the clan. You knew it was worth something, okay? But if you were inside of Ireland itself, it's pretty useless to you. You can't eat silver. So you would hand it over to the head of the clan, and from there, it'd be used as currency to the um, external world. So in the cities, silver is insanely important. And the cities would be seen as the kind of foreign Irish world. It was the world that was in between. So you've got the internal Gaelic native Irish world, that's internally. Externally, you have the main cities: Dublin, Cork, Waterford, Limerick. That's where you would see the silver. So inside the cities, it's all about the silver. And at that point, they have whaling scales where you put the whaling scale down, you put the silver on top, and from there you would weigh. Inside in York, so the Irish have captured the Irish Vikings, the Hiberno-Scandinavians. At this point, they have captured York, and they are now using coins. So, as a form of dominance in England and the wider world, in York, the Hiberno-Scandinavians are now putting symbols and their faces on coins. So now at this point, the Hiberno-Scandinavians are aware of the wider world, and they have their main Hiberno-Scandinavian smiths in York smithing their faces and symbols onto coins as a form of dominance. This then gets moved over to Dublin they start to bring this back in to the Hiberno-Scandinavian world and then into the Gaelic world around, is it, when did they, give us a second. First minting coins in Dublin. Oh, sorry, I take that back. 997. So in 997 is when they first start minting coins in Dublin. Okay, so in York. Boom, boom, boom. And it's okay, so all right, so it's that the first Viking coins minted in New York around 895. So 895, is that actually doing it? Ah, right. So they get Hiberno Scandinavian coins in 919. So in 919, we start to get Hiberno Scandinavian coins, and they're really used as a symbol of strength for the Hiberno Scandinavians when they're overseas, especially in York at the time, because their face and symbols are on these coins. Bum, bum, bum. But That kind of same symbolism doesn't exist inside of Ireland. So there's no need. So they're probably most likely still using hack silver in Dublin, but the whole thing of making the coin and then putting your symbol or your face on it, it's kind of worthless to the internal side of Irish politics at the time itself, but doesn't become important until leading up to the Battle of Clontarf, especially when you have Brian Brew who's coming in with more Charlemagne ideas into Ireland. But those ideas aren't coming into Ireland until the time of Brian Brew. So in England, it's important to make a coin and then put your face or symbol in it because it's a form of, it shows off strong administration. So it's done inside of England by the Hiberno Scandinavians at the time. Bum, 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 bum. Even Irish folk tales and mythology place a lot of importance on cattle raiding. Cattle raiding is still important in rural Mexico. Really? I know cattle raiding was still very important. I'm going to have to look into that one. How were livestock? Because Texas, I was joking around about that. It's the importance of cattle raiding inside of Texas. So that's interesting. All right, like how were livestock valued during the early medieval period? Well, insanely high. If they're treating livestock more important than silver in the early medieval period, and it's this kind of idea that a lot of historians are trying to highlight, especially on YouTube and stuff, that well, you can't eat hacked silver. It's important. Don't get me wrong. It's still important. It's not like these people are getting coins and chucking it into the bin. They're not doing that. They're handing over to their the head of the clans and stuff, and it's still used as a form of currency if you go into the cities. So, but the livestock are treated more important than silver and stuff. If that answers your question, with cattle being the most important for sure. Like, what was the most amount of cattle you could maybe pinch? Oh God, I have no idea. It's a good question. Because obviously, if we're talking about like mythology wise, they over exaggerate it. Hmm. Wayne, get me back. I because you would know by the bones in the areas and stuff would give an archaeologist a good idea. My wife would probably have an idea to that one, Wayne. To be honest with you, even during the 10th century, the Irish did not had cities as we know them. If not, I'm not mistaken. Okay, so how cities functioned in the early medieval period. So it's just something strange happened in 550, where originally we did have these old school Bronze Age, Iron Age settlements like this, right? But then the weirdest thing happens in 550. We think the what was it? The just as we're going into the golden age of Ireland, we have the Justinian plague that comes in around 550 ish, right? Start to build at the same time because of the Byzantine Empire and stuff. We do have the idea of cities, so we do have the idea of building monastic settlements with the church in the center. So the ideas from the Romans of what is a city centralized, middle, the center of the world, those kind of ideas start to come in. So we start to build these centered cities with churches in the middle, but they're not crowded. They're very small compared to what we would consider cities. So we start to construct a lot of these monastic settlements with the church in the middle. But as you can see here, they're not very good. They're having assemblies here, and the assemblies, so the clans would all come together. They would hold judges, they would hold rulings, they would come here to buy stuff. So we had markets here, especially on Sundays for Sunday Mass. So they are going here for church. Obviously, they would host festivals and games, they would play hurling. This is all happening at the monastic settlements. But once the assembly was over, they would all, the clans, the Tuat, as we would refer to them, and there's thousands of these found all over the place. They'd go back to their ring forts, their farmstead ring forts. So they all go back to their farmstead ring forts. Okay? So every Tuat, every clan would have a farmstead ring fort. So once the assembly was finished, most likely, every Sunday were Sunday Mass, they'd go back to their farmstead ring fort. Okay, and we think this is caused because of the plague, the Justinian plague that comes in around 550, which kills thousands and thousands of Irish and really wrecks up Donegal system at the time and causes massive problems even for the rulership of Donegal. But it doesn't help that Donegal was also, he was the last pagan king. He'd converted from paganism to Christianity. So Christianity started to dominate Ireland, and with that, they start to build these funky cities, which are monastic settlements, which are, when you think of cities, you think of loads of buildings with loads of people, but nobody, because of the Justinian plague, no one wants to live in cities anymore, so everyone's building farmstead ring forts. And from there, it's no longer big, massive battles that you would have had before. It's mostly revolved around cattle raiding. And they don't even have, like before they would have had, you know, these battles and all this stuff. Even skirmishes and stuff aren't really as violent as they used to be because it's all cattle raiding. It's all banter. It's all a laugh. It becomes more of a fun and laughter during the golden age of Ireland of the saints and scholars. Now, is that the full picture? No, of course, there's still violence. There's still blood feuds kicking off. But for the most part, a lot of violence is really put to the side. It's wild when you think of the golden age of Ireland. It really is, for the most part. There are so many people waking up during the golden age of Ireland and would have spent their whole entire life very peaceful, you know, going off doing cattle raiding, having a laugh, got themselves a small little cut, maybe an arrow in the shoulder. If we listen to the skirmish fighting and the cattle raiding that happened in Papua New Guinea before the arrival of guns onto the island, they talk about having skirmish fighting, and it was only a laugh. It would end with somebody getting an arrow in the shoulder. Everybody would laugh about it, pull the thing out. People would freak out, panic, yeah, and that afterwards have a laugh about it, and go drinking afterwards. And this is the same kind of system we say during the golden age of Ireland, where it's more of a banter. Now, is it completely perfect? No, we still have blood feuds kicking off. We still have fighting amongst them and stuff. So it's not a perfect system. But if you look at the casualty rate during this era, during the golden age of Ireland, between 550 up to 793, before the coming of the Vikings, violence appears to be very low. That it seems to be, you go off there, you get yourself a cut. For the most part, it was people cutting each other. They didn't even want to be pulled into a blood feud. So you're just trying to injure the other person to cause shock to them. And then afterwards, obviously, that young fella, the Ugluk, young warrior, he'd go off drinking with the rest of them, have a laugh, have a banter. Okay, that seems to be the common thing during the golden age of Ireland. But at the same time, is violence romanticized? And this is what causes the debate. Yeah, it is romanticized. So sometimes maybe, clans are looking to escalate blood feuds and stuff. But, that's what causes it to become somewhat complicated. But compared to the rest of the medieval period, it definitely seems to be much more peaceful. Okay. Then with the coming of the Vikings in there, especially fighting between the Enel and the men of Munster, fighting between the law of St. Patrick, which was meant to centralize more of these monastic settlements, and then the law of St. Columba, which wanted to keep monastic settlements more separated. What you have is an escalation of violence kicking off and more blood feuds kicking off left, right, and center. Okay. So going into the Viking Age, not only did we have fighting as the Vikings come in and burn the monastic settlements around the coastal areas of Ireland, which brings an end to the period of the saints and scholars, but we also have an escalation of violence between the cat raiders, the Kerns, the Irish war bands, and stuff. Okay. Bum, bum, bum. Where was I? Oh, and it's at that point as well, just to finish off the whole thing of cities, we start to have long forts. They become major trading ports at this point. And because more and more immigration comes in, especially from the Scandinavian areas, we start to see more city areas start to appear. And it's not just Scandinavians moving into cities. You also have Gaul Gael, foreign Irish, immigrating from, most likely wanting to leave their shitty life and stuff. Anybody wants to get away from the whole clan system or whatnot because they just probably didn't like it, probably just wasn't for them. They now had the option to just leave, just walk away from all, especially if they were not going to inherit anything. If they weren't going to inherit anything, they were going to go off into the city and stuff. and also, people that probably were previously slaves. If you look at England, for example, under Hiberno-Scandinavian administration, we see slaves making their way up the system. So it was probably the same inside of Dublin as well, that you managed to get your freedom, became a free man, and then go off and become a Viking, go raiding, go take a whole load of loot, and then make a name for yourself up the system. So, you know, cities were definitely an opportunity, even for other Irishmen, as referred to as foreign Irish Gaul Gael. Bum, 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 bum. Oh, where am I? Where am I? Where am I? Oh, yeah. Sorry for taking too much of the class. No, no, it's perfectly grand. Bum, bum, bum. You could use your OI, and I take the whole lot. Yeah, OI. I'm just quickly going through the comments there. Yeah, Jim, you were saying about this comment as well, about cattle going wherever they want, especially when they're driven and stuff. I would definitely agree there. A lot of this is why people are they really a lot of people want to do a reenactment of a cattle raid and see how cattle react. So it's very much debated. How the hell could cattle raid function? If you're trying to steal someone's cattle, how do you get them from A to B? A lot of people are arguing that. So we don't know how the hell a cattle raid would function, to be honest with you, Jim. So there's a lot of people, and I'd be up for it as well, want to be part of a cattle raid, want to dress up in the early medieval kit and go out there and steal someone else's cattle and bring it back to the location where they want. So very good question. A lot of people are asking that as well. How the hell do you even do cattle raid when cattle do have a tendency to just go wherever? Like, did people back then ever search cattle, such as fishing? Seems like cattle raiding was so bad no one could keep their cattle. Huge part, but it's a huge part of like obviously people when it comes down to food, there's no shortage of food. Okay, so to highlight, cattle is seen as a high status currency. Okay, but there's no fear of starving to death. Okay, so if you're thinking, oh, if they don't have any cattle, they'll starve to death. No, no, no. They still do plenty of farming. So they're all living on a farmstead ring forest. So just pop back over to this photo, and I'll highlight this one again. But they're all living on a farmstead ring forest. So they all have farms, and they're all, they're growing their own barley, their own wheat, especially to make alcohol with. As you said, they're doing fishing, so there's plenty of food in Ireland. It's just this is a pure status thing of going out there. I am the boy, especially when it comes down to marriages. Irish women in the medieval period will only marry the man with the best cows or the best cow. If you look at the Tomba Cooley, it came down to the best cow in Ireland. Who had the best cow? The women of Ireland were only marrying the man who could raid the best cow in Ireland. And that's what causes the fight in the Tomba Cooley, I love ring forts, man. Absolutely love it. Like, the early medieval period, it's definitely popping for sure. Like, uh, yeah, I've gone through the yellow fever as well. There is a yellow fever popping in there as well. Like it wouldn't be my academic field of expertise. I've done historical level reading, but I haven't done any of this stuff under an academic. And also, like I need to highlight that as well. Like I don't like behind here is not a massive archive of books, and also like I only have the likes of books that you can get in the shop, and I'm over in Okinawa as well. So just want to highlight that as well. I'm not going to correct any scholar or academic who has way better access and a far better education than I do, because I only have the books that I've been able to pile into my bag and off to Okinawa, and there's no academic behind me as well to observe my work. So definitely. Question for sure what I'm saying, because there's definitely tons and thousands of holes in what I said there. Like, this is what wanted to hear more about. Oh, I rather live in the golden age of Ireland. Wayne, I thought you'd be more into the Viking age. To be honest with you, I didn't realize you were a golden age of Ireland man. Ireland's golden age, only 7th century AD. Remember? Oh, aye. It seems like Wayne is definitely on that list. Wayne, you were born in the 7th century, weren't you? Du- 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 du. That's hilarious. I love you guys. Thank you, guys, for all that stuff. Joining the Gall Gales seemed go maybe. I just imagine Wayne getting sick one day. Wayne, I don't even think you'd leave the ring for. I think for sure you'd be inside the ring for all age drinking away. I can't see you getting up one day and going off to one of the city areas for a bit of drink. Bum bum bum. For sure. If you tried to move beast, you'd be on the option. Oh, I. Yeah, you see, this is what's asking the question is how the hell does a cattle raid? And you can understand like why they make such a big deal out of capturing other cattle. Like to do such a feat must have been seen as something else, you know. So yeah, cattle raiding for sure is interesting. Like, would the cattle raiders use They do hobbler horses. There's we don't know for sure what the name of the horse was during the early medieval period. In the late medieval period, they're definitely using the hobbler horse. We've been using an earlier version of the hobbler horse, but we're not quite sure what breed of horse it is during the early medieval period. So you're bang on right. These guys are more like cowboy raiders than just running around on foot. You definitely hit that one right there, Wayne. So they are definitely more like cowboys than these guys just running around on foot and stuff. So you're definitely bang on right there. A cattle raid ain't that bad. You can always steal back. Yeah, but this is the game. It was a game where you steal my cattle, I steal your cattle. You know, I get into a little bit of a duel. You get a little bit of a cut. Oh Jesus! Like that's the game. It's all a game, and it's all seasonal. I'll be back next season. This season, every once in a while, and this is what causes the problem. Someone loses an eye. You know that this is what causes slowly but surely. You know, I'll get him back next season. Before you know it, someone's. It's what causes a blood feud. You know, you killed my uncle. I kill your. You know, and you see how tit for tat does escalate, and you can see that in the stories as well. Tit for tat, escalating, 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 and then this assemblies kick in. So once to keep level from escalating, everybody then goes assembly, or they even have emergency assemblies sometimes, allegedly. Where is my monastic settlement? So go off to the monastic settlement, have yourself an assembly where they de-escalate the violence by paying what was it called? A cattle tribute. So you'd pay no, sorry, a fine. So you pay a fine of cattle and stuff to the other clan, and that was it, meant to be finished. But sometimes that didn't solve the problem, especially against the war bands and stuff. Look at the old photo. Oh, aye. I would think you could read cattle. Yeah, probably. Like we do have depictions as well of people going cattle raiding on foot as well. But you know, the horses are there. Like, man, tough being a guy in Ireland at the time. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I think I kind of knew what you were trying to spell there. Jim, not to be a jerk. So the chicks always wanted to marry. Yes, 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 yes. So it's all status, and this is the thing that's really important. They were not starving to death. It is literally who has the biggest sausage. Even the high kingship, the over kingship, and everything. It is all about who has the biggest sausage. If you've got the most cattle at the end of the season, you're over king. If you take everyone else's cattle, you become over king. You've subjugated all of these people. They now have to go to your assembly at the end of the year, especially Christmas, and they're subjugated into your game. It's not a case of just starving to death, okay? As people point out, there's plenty of other means to feed yourself. It is a game of subjugation. Wasn't the horse about half the size of the cattle? Yeah, very, very debated in that one. Uh, yeah, I know what you mean there, Jim. Raid instead of read. I make the same mistake as well all the time when I'm just have a good night. Off there, cat. See you. Good night. Where are the locals? Oh, 1 second. Quickly glance up that one actually. Ba, 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 ba. I know what you mean. Just let me quickly. Where am I? Live, live, live. There. 1 second. This is a mess. There we go. Oh, where is that one? Oh yeah. 1 second. There's Seamus. Mm-hmm. Derby. Do you know what? I actually thought that was rare. I don't know why. When I Google search that one, I was expecting the cars and stuff. No, it was actually faster because we're dealing with leather shoes with no soil on the bottom of it. It was actually faster to run barefoot. It's interesting, all right, because we always look at barefoot as a form of poverty, not realizing most of the world at the time had no sole on the feet. So it was actually faster to take your shoes off to go running. So it was actually, so that's why you've got endless depictions of people barefoot. Not the fact they couldn't afford shoes or anything, it was faster to run around barefoot. What's very interesting as well is the same argument is popping up in Japan during this period as well, that it was only cavalry that wore shoes. And there's actually loads of raw depictions in high status depictions in Japan. The paintings always give people like loads of shoes and stuff. But when you're looking at raw depictions of Japanese infantry with the spears, they've got no shoes on. So it's starting to build up this argument now that shoes in paintings and stuff are there to show high status. But then when we look at more raw drawings and images, there's no shoes on. And the reason for it, like people were taking their shoes off so they don't slip and slide and fall. And during the Hundred Years' War, we have descriptions of the longbowmen taking their shoes off when they go into rougher terrain, slippery, rougher, and wet terrain. There's descriptions of English longbowmen taking their shoes off. So even the English themselves, when they're running around the field and stuff, they're taking off their shoes. So back then, it was definitely easier to take your shoes off. They use dogs to herd sheep. I wonder. I was thinking about that as well. Campfire. To be honest with you, because of the fact that we have the Irish Wolfhound. How did the Irish Wolfhound work and function? So far, from all the research I've done in readings, Irish Wolfhounds are only used to protect farmstead ring forts. So were they used to protect cattle? Were they used only to protect the farmstead ring fort, the people inside? So the only thing I have is that I have never come across a Irish Wolfhound there to protect cattle. I haven't come across it, or any form of dogs there used cattle, but not to say it didn't happen. They only seem to be used to protect the farmstead ring fort, and that's the women and the children inside. So we do have Irish wolfhounds in Ireland at the time, but they only seem to be inside of the Irish ring fort and there to protect the women and children when the men are away. I can see true crime videos on YouTube. Sickening cattle hit. Da, 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 da. Imagine running barefoot while raiding and then you step into a torn. Oh, well, they were harder men, to be fair. They were much, much more harder men back then. They would have easily, put their entire foot in there but like you have stories only from the 1920s of hard men just pulling up the sleeves and grabbing thorn bushes and pulling it out. And it doesn't even bother them, So we even have descriptions from the 1920s all the way up to the 1960s of the common local man just pulling up his sleeves anytime you see a thorn bush or anything and just pulling it out of the ground like pure aggression. Harder men back then, I tell you that. Cattle don't like dogs. Well, that could be it. Just give us a second there, lads. I'll pop over to the toilet. Where are we? Bum, 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 bum. Everyone back then must have had Hobbit feet. Yeah, definitely had a completely different feet to what we have now. Because most of our feet these days are very crushed because of shoes. But as you said there, must have had more kind of webbed feet and stuff, very hairy, you know. Because you have a lot of people giving out, oh, how could you run around with no shoes on and stuff? Big hairy legs and feet. It's the same thing with Irish fellas now. Like people are giving out that there's way too many Irish lads running around in shorts in the pitch of winter, so they just have the hoodie on. Right now, even I've got shorts on and stuff. It's good with big hairy legs in Ireland, you know, hairy feet and stuff. Natural. Shoes are very bad, especially for Irish men. So don't wear shoes. Kill one was protecting. Yeah, no, he was protecting one of the ring forts. There was an Irish wolfhound was protecting one of the. They were having a feast, and the Irish wolfhound was outside. There was no men outside. Cuchulainn went in there and he killed the wolfhound because Cuchulainn was a stranger to it. Bum, bum, bum. Ah, nice. I walk around bare feet all the time. But I go on very fucking just wooden ground and stuff, so I don't think my skin is going that hard. Cattle only. Ah, aye, aye. Just highlight that one. Didn't feet get cold in the winter? Yeah, we get that a lot. Big natural feet won't be too bad. But they had shoes. Like they don't get me wrong, the shoe finds that we have in Ireland are absolutely beautiful. Irish Viking shoes. There we go. So there is loads and loads of Ireland. If I just take a picture of that one. This was from the Welsh Viking who wanted to highlight this. So we do have beautiful shoes in this era. Did I save them to the right spot? Ah, there is. So there's plenty of very gorgeous shoes in this era, all right? Like, can I get a better photo of that under? That was from the Welsh Viking, who produced that one. So there is really, really gorgeous shoes. I think this is a better one. Yeah. Bum, 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 bum. Just ignore this. So when I push this up, just ignore the sole. Somebody added this. People do this thing where they add modern soles onto early medieval shoes. But yeah, they're making these sort of shoes. Now, obviously, that has a sole there. The sole would not exist. That would not exist in the early medieval period. So ignore that. But the rest of this here is the early medieval shoe. So they did have shoes in the early, what very fancy shoes in the early medieval period. And then you have the Jorvik. The Jorvik shoe was also really, really popular in Ireland as well in this period. Jorvik shoes. Disney Jorvik. That's what was it called? There's also somebody also added a, so actually I have the actual find here. All these reenactment shoes, they've gone off and added soles onto them. And there was no soles during the early medieval period. The images. Where am I now? Oh, is it in there? Ah, there we go. There's the Jorvik shoe, which was actually popular in Ireland at the time as well during the early medieval period. That's the original find. As you can see there in the original find, no sole. Okay, need to highlight that because when you put in the other Jorvik shoes, people put soles in them so they don't fall. But there was no sole in the original one. Were wolves an issue? I've been thinking about that as well, to be honest with you. Wolves are a huge problem, especially with the Kerns, because the Kerns are the cattle raiders. So the war bands at the time, the cattle raiding war bands, were referred to as Kerns. And I'm basing all the answers around this in 937 in the 10th century. So the cattle raiders, the Kerns, and then we have professional fighting war bands, which are the Gaul Gael. So the Gaul Gael were the professional fighting war bands for fighting in proper skirmishes and battles. But then the professional cattle raiders were the Kerns. And the majority of the Kerns were made up of Uglok, which were young warriors, but they're basically the in trainees between the age of 14 to 25. And then after 25, if they didn't inherit land, if they did inherit land, they would go back to their farm, said Ringfort, inherit that land or inherit other land. But if they didn't, they would move on to either become Gaul Gael, professional kind of fighting warriors, or they would stay as Kerns, okay? And they would become professional cattle raiders within the cattle raiding warband, okay, which were kind of light infantry. And in it, there's low. Not only did they live during this winter, they would go back to. So during the winter, the Gaul Gael would go back into the cities because they were kind of like mercenary war bands. But from my understanding, the Kerns, they would go back, whatever Tuat clan they were representing, basically, they would go to that farm, said Ringfort, but they would switch around and stuff depending on how alliances were and so on and so forth. Who had the biggest stick, who had the most cattle, and all that kind of stuff, right? So the war bands would go into the farmstead ring forts, from my understanding, and settlements and stuff, and stay there during the winter months. Then during the summer, they would go back into the forestry again. And they also allegedly made their own makeshift ring forts as well. The Kerns did for the summer months, and also on top of that as well, they also stayed with women that would look after their needs as well. So we do have accounts of that inside the forest areas, but they stayed mostly in the forest area. So they're very much connected with the wolves. So you could imagine wolves were a huge problem for the Kerns. You also have depictions of Kerns going around with wolf heads on their head. Um, there's I don't haven't come across I've come across Kerns behaving like wolves by the depictions by Gerald of Wales. Do I have that? Oh, I've run off. Right. Is there anything useless I can get rid of? Anyway, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You get the idea anyway. But regardless, we do have depictions of Kerns going around with wolf fur and wolf kind of the heads of the wolves and stuff on top of their own head and stuff. So we do have depictions of that, and them even behaving like wolves. So they must have been killing wolves. So wolves must have been a part of the society. They weren't going all their way to wipe out wolves. So there seems to be a level of respect there. But for them to go around with wolf pallets on or something, there must have been more there that we're missing, or I'm missing in my research between the currents. So, like, there could have been a rite of passage where maybe they had to go and hunt a wolf, or maybe defend themselves from a wolf or something. But regardless, it does. And if you look into the young deeds of Cuchulainn, wolves are constantly a threat to the little Cuchulainn. So, especially for 14-year-old boys, wolves do seem to be a problem, an issue for the cattle raiders. would they have been a problem during the raid, the operation itself, where they were cattle raiding? I just don't know, to be honest with you. I haven't come across a source of them being attacked while raiding, but during sieges and stuff, especially where I live, up around the Munster and Limerick area, we do have sources of wolves being a problem during sieges and even villages after a siege, of literally gangs of wolves going into a settlement after it's been attacked to attack local people. So after a siege or even a village being attacked, people are trying, the leftover people, which are weak women and children, maybe a few bandits wandering around the place. Gangs of wolves would see the opportunity, especially since most of the bodies haven't been buried yet, to go into the towns. So gangs of wolves will go into settlements after a raid or an attack on a settlement, and they would go around attacking the locals. And sometimes, if you look at Kilmallock in the late medieval period, Kilmallock was wiped out of it by the English, and what was left of the local people were attacked and completely wiped out of it by a pack of wolves. A pack of wolves went into Kilmallock and wiped out the settlement in there. And we know this because, they were eaten by the wolves, so their bodies and carcasses would have been left around the place. So they were wiped. Oh, and the wolves are still there. I forgot that part. When people went into, they had to recapture Kilmallock from the wolves, believe it or not. The local people. No, it was the English. Was it? Well, this time it would have been under the control of the English, but regardless, people would have had to go back in there and recapture Kilmallock from a pack of wolves. I forgot that bit. So yeah, wolves were definitely a problem for sure. Probably not at rating point. They were an issue, but reinforced just. Bum, bum, bum. Men would just go back to the old days. You would grow strong back then, no problems. Like people in Ion, I think I'm crazy. Where, but this is so common, man. It right now. It is so. I'm doing it. I just find it more comfortable to walk around in shorts. I'm perfectly warm, perfectly grand with the hoodie on, man. And that's it. Everyone thinks an Irish young fella is insane for walking. I'm gonna have to make a short of this later. I probably will. Walk around with just shorts on, a hoodie. I get too hot. I get too hot. I have to put on the old bloody shorts. Just get too hot, and it's natural. Just the way the Irish body is, huh? I grew up where it was regular to blow winter. Yeah, typical Irish lad. There's so many right now. It's snowing in Ireland, and there are lads going up to the side of hills just in shorts on, like, do you know. Just I get too hot. Didn't they use to blind them in? Yeah. Dun, 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 dun. So these. Not sure which one that one's connected to. I would call these. Yeah. That was when we were talking about the old feet. I have to catch up with most of this stuff. So foot fetish stuff wasn't a thing then. Maybe it's still right now. What was it? There's a video game called Street Fighter, and there's a character called Jury, and she has no shoes on, and she's very popular with a certain group of people, and they're not even shy about it, like, So was sucking the old feet very popular? Believe it or not, there's a lot of bare feeting going around in the Philippines as well, and the Philippines has the highest percentage of that going on. So, so it's very, very popular in the Philippines. Did the Irish really have women warriors? There's laws that come out in the 7th century that prevent women from taking part in skirmishes, violent skirmishes. So, and looking at the likes of Cucullum, who was trained to fight by a woman in Scotland, it's most likely that there were women warriors before the 7th century. But like as we were pointing out there, like most of the fighting is cattle raiding. By the time we get up to the Viking Age, It's very rare. We still come across some sources of Irish Viking women. Very rare. Very, very rare. The reason for that is not only do we have laws put in place to try to know to prevent women from taking part in cattle raids and raiding full stop, but women are now the target of raids going into the Viking Age. So at the Viking Age, a lot of these ports become very, very, very successful because the main currency in cities now isn't just silver, it's now women. Okay? So women are now the targets of these cat raids. And these women are being taken and brought to city settlements to be sold. Dublin becomes one of the biggest cities in the West because of the female slave market. Okay? And they're not just raiding for Irish women. You see women from Poland, Slavic women. We see Swedish women. We see Kiev women. We see Muslim women. There are women from all over the world are being taken. Like these Irish Vikings are going to Iberian Peninsula. They're going to Spain. They're going off to Scandinavia. They're going to Iceland. They don't care. If you're a rival or an enemy, they will physically take the women and take them back to Dublin to sell them. Okay. So obviously the highest percentage in there obviously is Irish women, but it's made up of everyone at this point. I both bet was crap themselves when they see human work. Probably, but yeah, like you can understand why Kern would go into battle with a wolf's head. Yeah, there is werewolves are become a huge part of Irish mythology. Isn't one version of werewolf Romans seeing Kern as wolves, and that's the origin of the creation. Yeah, yeah. I'm not sure if it's a Roman source. It could be a Roman source. To be honest with you. Bum, 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 bum. Kerns, Kerns, Kerns. Sorry, sounds very Indo-European. Could be. A lot of people are saying cattle raiding culture is Indo-European, and this could be why the India, and the actual Indians, not the Native Americans, worship cows. So there's a huge theory right now that the Indo it's just the Irish kind of kept on to the cattle raiding side of things, and the Indians kind of got rid of it and then escalated their worshipping part of it. So yeah. So maybe there's a universe where Irish people worship cow dung. You know, I don't know, but that's one of the many theories that are out there. Saint Bridget, the wolf in Saint Bridget. Is there a wolf in Saint Bridget story that would not surprise me? Let me have a quick gawk. The Wolf and Saint Bridget. Oh Jesus. Saint Bridget and the Wolf. White Shadow. My God, there's a load on. Why have I not read this? It's a good bit on it. Yeah, I'll have a look at that later because God, I didn't see that tale before. Is that a modern tale or like is that a tale that pops up in the 19th century or in the medieval era, or is it something that's sourced from it? Hundreds of years ago. Well, the 100 years ago kind of gives it away for this source. Is the story modern or medieval? The story of St. Bridget, medieval legend that has passed down the ages. Oh, yeah. It is believed to come from the 6th century. When is it written down? The problem is that story is not written down until the 1900s. So the original tale appears to first appear in the 6th century, but it's not written down until the 1900s. And the biggest problem about that is that people completely change. Going into the 20th century, they completely change the origins of that story. So we don't even have the original interpretation of the story. I'll have a look at it later, but I don't know if we'll be able to get much out of that one, The Wolf and St. Bridget, because it wasn't written and documented in the 1900s, but it is originally a 6th century story. So have a look at that later. Interesting nonetheless. The Wolf and Saint Bridget. Oh, yeah, boar attacks. Another thing that's very high status in the 10th century, and we have that because of Diarmid and Grania. Diarmid and Grania. Diarmid is killed during the boar attack. Boar attack is something also done by the Kerns and also the King's Warband with the king itself, but it seems to be done more by the King's Warband, who were called the Clí Éirí, right? So you have fighting warbands, the Gaul Gael. Then we have the Kerns, the Cattle Raiders, and then we have the King's Warband, the Clí Éirí. The Clí Éirí love going for an old boar hunt. It is very, very difficult to go boar hunting. But we have a lot of stories. One of the particular famous ones is Diarmid and Grania. And Diarmid and Grania also highlights that kind of blur between cattle raiders and how you have, especially Uglucks, and the blur that goes between being a kern, a cattle raider, and Clí Éirí, because sometimes we like cut and dry and say you have to be a King's Warband, you have to be a kern. And that may have never been the case, because we're dealing with more warbands. That these are kind of labels we're kind of shoving on to simplify the conversation. But regardless, as being a part of the King's Warband, when you were a part of the King's Warband, you were under the King's banner. You would have gone boar hunting, or any noble. A lot of nobles would have gone boar hunting, and it was a team thing where you'd have one group going out there to get the boar out, and then as a group you'd have the kerns with their spears, and their spears would have been specifically designed for beer hunting, not beer hunting. They would have had the spears with the long poke, and then there would have been a shaft. They needed this kind of shaft in the middle of it to prevent. So when you impale the boar continues running up the shaft. So you need this kind of part to prevent it running up the shaft. So you normally, with the spear, have a head like this. So the boar goes into the spear, and then it gets stuck here. And you'd have a whole group of lads, because when the boar comes rushing, it kind of buzzes all over the place. So you need a lad with a whole group of spears out to catch it. So one group of Clí Éirí go into the forest to kind of force the boar out, and then as a group you work together. Very dangerous. Dozens of lads get killed. That's how the end of Diarmid and Grania ends. That story ends when Diarmid is killed, and I think it was done on purpose. Was it the king the time, or it was Finn McCool purposely makes a fool of Diarmid during the bear hunt, which ends up getting him killed, Diarmid killed. And that's because of jealousy, because he went off with Grania. I think that's what happened there. I can't remember how that story did. Who was it that made a fool out of Diarmid coming to the end of the story? Brilliant story, Diarmid and Grania. I respect robes, etc., but have coyotes hit? Oh, Jesus, that's terrifying stuff. There's a level of respect that you need to give to coyotes or wolves, but at the same time, I wouldn't be a biggest lover of them because of the damage. It's the same thing with snakes. Snakes are really, really awesome. I really, really like snakes, but I do fear and respect them because, geez, any second, I've seen that before, like snakes. And I live out here in Okinawa. Loads of poisonous snakes out here. I wouldn't go near the habu snake. It's one of the snakes in the world, and it's very aggressive as well. And then just south from where I am, we have the python. Is it the python? Yes, we have the python. And the python, the anaconda snake and the python snake are two of the biggest snakes in the world. And the anaconda snake eats just pigs and deer and mostly sea creatures. The python, so the anaconda swims on the ground. The python, on the other hand, climbs trees for the most part and hunts human. It does hunt human. So just south of me, we have the Philippines, and just south of me, we have pythons that do eat women and children. If the shoulders are too big, I've been told a few times that a python wouldn't ambush me. If I was walking by, didn't see the python wouldn't ambush me and eat me, but it would eat my wife. So I would have to defend my wife against a python if we were in the Philippines. and it's very common. A lot of people go missing in the Philippines from python attacks because they do eat them. Every once in a while, a story will come back about a local woman who was eaten by a python. When a woman does go missing within the community in the Philippines, the men have to come together and hunt down the python, and then they kill the python, open it up, and they'll find the missing woman inside. Very sad, especially with the Philippines because they're a very tight community. Fighting in front lines during the 10th century AD would make her an easy target for capture and raiding. I don't want to sound sexist, but one of the biggest problems women are having with modern warfare right now, why so many women are leaving the military, is because the weight is too much for their body. Women are great around the hips and stuff for carrying weight, but when it comes down to the shoulders and stuff, women are having huge problems with it. There's a lot of women who are obviously the exception to the rule, which you also see in the 10th century. So in the 10th century, we do have women that are the exception to the rule, but warfare should never be an option for, sorry, warfare should never be mandatory for a woman. That'd be insane. And one of the biggest problems with the 10th century is the weight is going up too much. In the ninth century, and we do have women that defend, even up to the 11th century, we have women that defend, the settlements and stuff, and they have to defend themselves because men are trying to take them away. So we do have women that are trained to defend themselves, but there's a difference between a woman trying to defend herself inside her own ring fort. If a man tries to go into the ring fort to attack her, there is a difference between that and putting on a whole load of kit that mostly weighs onto the shoulders, although there's belts to try to, bring the weight more comfortable. It still becomes very, very heavy on top of them. So although there's a lot of women that push themselves, even today, push themselves and are the exception to the rule, a lot of women out there are the exception to the rule. Most women are not. My wife would never in a million years do it, in the 10th century. So we do have literature that have women that are the exception to the rule, but not most women are. Okay. So you can imagine 6th, 7th century going off and do cattle raiding with the boys and stuff. You could imagine, a good few girls, especially if they're into martial arts and stuff, being a part of that and stuff. But there's a massive difference, in the 6th and 7th century going off to cattle raiding, doing a bit of martial arts and stuff. Women are amazing at martial arts, loads of women involved. But then when you're getting into the 10th century, wearing a whole load of kit on and then grinding on for hours and hours and hours and hours, although we do have exceptions to the rule, Jesus, most women could not do it. And I definitely would not make an option for them. And, those laws and stuff, there's laws now in place to prevent women from taking part. So although there's, it doesn't completely stop them, we do have accounts of, especially mythology side of things of women being involved. They're the exception, where can I swing from the high 30s? No numbers, which is awkward when there is a jumping down. A guy channel talisman map. I just chuck that one there. Bum, 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 bum. Bum, 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 bum. Well, Philip, what's the crack? Sorry for the slow reply there. I had you on for a good 10 minutes before I came back to you. Doing grand. Happy New Year. Do you hear there's a talk of... That's going to be funny as well. They've been talking about reintroducing wolves into Ireland for some time now, to be honest with you. Very dangerous, especially for people that go for walks pretty much here, there, and everywhere. People are too much into their walking culture now. So I'm not sure if you could reintroduce wolves into Ireland. If they did, you need some way for men to defend themselves if they did bump into a wolf that was hungry, Uh, Cranog has oil bore. Yeah, I remember work. I've done some work in Cranog. Oh my god, I worked there. Butchering it now. Yeah, man. No. I just quickly catch up with the conversation. Yeah, I'm in Okinawa right now. Been in Okinawa for, would you believe I've been in Okinawa now for 5 years? Since the housing crisis got really, really bad in Ireland after the coronavirus. I could have stayed with the parents, but it started becoming very difficult. I was going into my 31 at that point. I was married as well. So myself and the wife went off to Okinawa in Japan. Uh, being terrified of snakes. I Jesus. Australia is another place that's very, very bad for the old snakes. Tougher women, what you get now? Far, far, far tougher women than what you would get now. Like those women back then, bit like oxes, like because of the amount of work they had to do. I wouldn't even call it housework because they had to do work all over the farm. A lot of women died, actually, believe it or not, around the river and stuff. They would be working cleaning the clothes of the river, and if you had a deep part of the river, because of the wool got very, very heavy. They would fall in and drown. But yeah, so definitely not women of the kitchen, more of women of the, I suppose, household. But they worked all over the farm, so yeah. Main thing is that we can agree that they didn't go and fight in the front lines. Well, not all of them anyway. Especially when women had problems wearing all the armor and stuff, causing back pains and stuff. Uh, bu- 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 du- du- du. Yeah, like there's definitely evidence of women in this period. We do have women, especially in Finland and America, of women on the walls trying to defend themselves. Because if the walls were penetrated, let's say if you look at the farmstead ring fort, pop back over to the farmstead ring fort. Like if those walls were penetrated and men hopped over, the women were taken and they were going to be sold into slavery. So of course, women are going to fight to the death. You know. When I visited Australia, I never saw any snakes. Aren't you lucky? Jesus. Is it very bad? It's not. To be honest with you, it's meant to be bad where I am, but thank God, touch wood. I haven't seen too many yet. I've seen once. I've seen the Habu snake. Never once did I see it again. Massive take, man, and they're so aggressive as well. But the one I seen, Jesus, absolutely huge, and it was in the middle of the night as well. I was walking by it, like very aggressive stuff. Like would keep some. The ancient Irish army used to have big oath, butter oak mixed them together. Oh, I would not be able to withstand a single gall if he called his wife his. Oh yes, I remember that one from. Isn't there a source of that inside of Julius Caesar? Do you know what would Irish warriors would eat during the campaigns during the 10th century? Oh, because I don't think it was jerky. There could be a form of jerky in there, perhaps. Stews definitely must have been a thing. Someone setting up a stew and stuff. The thing is they're never, even during sieges, they're not too far away from a civilization that would, society that would come over and support them because these ring forts are all over the place. So they most likely set up a whole load of stew um, in some of the camps and stuff. I'm not sure what they would have eaten during the siege of Dublin or any of those sieges of the settlements. Couldn't tell you because and then you've got those long marches up to the north of Ireland and stuff as well. I think I was saying this to Rachel before as well, but I imagine they probably just took with them, and also the raiding as well. Their raiding campaign. I suppose look into what food types the Vikings had up in Norway would it be a good starting point. Yeah, I should really investigate into that one. Be honest with you, man. Let's highlight that there for now. Off topic question: did the Irish have special ritual events where they would cut their hair or refuse to cut their hair? Some Native Americans. This comes up a lot during the Tudor period, where they talk about hairstyles and stuff. It could be just fashionable, but then why are they so protective of their hairstyle when the Tudors go and ban it? It could be just their native identity becomes a thing. There we go. So this is mostly the hairstyle that we see during the Viking Age, by the looks of it. But we also see different hairstyles and stuff. But this seems to be the main hairstyle for the looks of the Gala Gale and the Kerns. So you can see that shaved in the back, and then the fringe gets grown forward. But they're it, mm, going into the Tudor period. It definitely does seem to be a pride thing. To be honest with you, but maybe it's just part of the Irish identity, perhaps. And then we also have the banning of growing the hair back under the English as well. The English tried to ban growing the hair. Was it shaving the sides and growing the hair back? You see as well that the English tried to ban, I suppose. Men have an advantage of being able to keep watch while peeing. I love women here in the US did a lot of manual labor because they were raised on farms. Yeah, it's funny because we have this idea of, well, I did that wrong, didn't I? It's funny because of the fact that we have this idea of a woman's place is in the kitchen, and that's not the case during the medieval period. Women didn't go outside of the settlement because of attack, especially during the Viking Age. So women had to be, it was by law, they had to be accompanied by a man when they left their settlement. Okay. So if they left like the farmstead, ring fort, or if they left the monastic settlement, they had to be accompanied by a man, and that was made by law. And the man had to be equipped with weapons. That was also a law. So the man had to have a weapon. Woman had to be accompanied by a man. But you can see why they were going to be attacked. So it's not like women protested against this law. I think the law was there just to stop silly girls wandering off and being kidnapped by foreign men and stuff. When I say foreign, I mean foreign to the community, like. But they definitely hung around the entire farm. That's why I'm like, women were definitely a part of the housing. To identify. I don't even know what I'm saying anymore. But yeah, the whole idea of a woman's places in the kitchen definitely didn't exist during the medieval period. But at the same time, it's not like they could just wander off their settlement. Norse women washing their clothes in the river, be like, this is a good day to. How behind am I in my reading? For play, I visited Japan for a few weeks last year. Unreal, I'd move if I could. I'd been reading about Okinawa and the native people. Philip, have you seen the murder of hornets in Japan? I've bumped into a few times. Scary stuff, man. I think if I get hit off them twice, I'm dead, dead. I haven't been hit once, thank God. I've seen plenty of them, and I have knocked a few of them over, to be honest with you. But I haven't been stung. Do you know what I mean? Bum, bum, bum. Yeah, porridge is a good one. They probably did just set up pots of porridge and stew for the old sieging and stuff. Du-du-du. Debatable. We're still debating about the haircuts for the Irish, aren't we? Always debating on that one. What kind of haircut did they have this season? Should shave the front. Women did the work in the kitchen, but they also worked out in the field. Yeah, I see. This is the thing. So myself and Rachel were talking about this because you have this idea, this kind of romantic Victorian idea of a woman's place is in the kitchen. But in the medieval period, women had, especially in the early medieval period, women had to be a part of not just the kitchen, but the entire farm area. And then they had to dictate what everybody was doing. So they literally went around pretty much with a whip and made sure everybody was in line. And they had keys. Like they literally, women went around in both Ireland and in Scandinavia, would go around with keys because they took pride in dominate, that they were the head of the household. Okay. So not only were they dictating and did the entire the kit what was going on in the kitchen, what was going on in the whole farmstead ring fort, but they also did all of the administration of how much was going on. So all the kind of, I don't know if it was paperwork administration, but the main administration itself was all ran by women. It was not but ran by men. Men were off doing manly stuff, you know. They like men were also working throughout the farmstead ring fort. You know, they were doing the heavy lifting. They were, you know, doing the labor work. They were going out. Like they were one of the reasons why. And this is the handy thing where a woman couldn't venture outside of the farmstead ring fort and the local farm area. Men could go out into the forestry. Men could go way out into the river. You know, men could go out into the wider areas and stuff and not worry about being taken away, where there's this constant fear of women being taken, especially during the Viking Age, where women were treated as the main currency. You know, women did work in the kitchen, and they also worked out in the field. Oh, did I accidentally? Oh yeah, I highlighted the wrong one by accident. Sorry. Oh, why did they do that? Similar to monks shaving the top of their head. Guys, by the way, needs to be highlighted. This is the haircuts are still all argued and debated. So definitely, if you have a source there, definitely chuck it up there. But from my knowledge, the haircuts are still being argued and debated. I wonder what people seasoned their food with back then. So we do have trade. God, this is another one that's very debated, and I haven't sat down, but we do know that they season their food because during the golden age of Ireland, they have that trade going all the way to Constantinople, and then during the economic golden age in Ireland, you have that trade not just going over to Constantinople, but then tearing over to Baghdad, then tearing over to Beijing and stuff as well. And it's much more strongly connected. So, where during the golden age of Ireland, the success rate of trade was quite slim. Once we get into the economic golden age of Ireland, the Viking Age, the Vikings, especially the men of Dublin, they have no fear. We were saying earlier on about the coins, the Irish Vikings putting their heads on the coins and stuff. That there is to hammer down a level of fear. You know, the men of Dublin are feared at this point. And if you think as a Viking, you can take or raid any of their stuff, they will track you down and butcher you, you know. Once they get a hold of you, you know, you're a raider, you think you're smart raiding one of their, going into the 10th century, like obviously in the 9th century, you have all this raiding happening left, right, and center. But once we get into the 10th century, all these trade networks are now being controlled and mostly dominated by the Hiberno Scandinavians. And the Hiberno Scandinavians, with their Raven banner, if you see them and they're hunting you down because you raided one of their ships, they will get a hold of you. They will find out who you are. They will get a hold of you and they will have a bit of fun with you. And then they will remove your head and they will place it on a pike, especially in Dublin. York, very much still debated, but Dublin, it's been archaeologically proven and in literature proven that if you mess around with them, they will have a bit of fun with you. Not very nice whatsoever, pretty hard, you know, medieval, quite literally. You know, they're literally, this is the point where the word medieval literally gets its name from, is because of what they're going to do to you. And then head goes up on a pike. You know, there's a reason why it becomes an economic golden age, because those traders and merchants are now fully protected by the men of Dublin. Okay, and so trade booms, and because trade booms, then we have, you know, as you were pointing out, seasonal seasoning and stuff starts to come out of places like North Africa, perhaps even West Africa, perhaps. Definitely comes up as far as Constantinople and off into Baghdad and places like that. And it's because the Hiberno Scandinavians and the Scandinavians in the wider networks and stuff are dominating their trade routes. Was a bishop, woman, and had some of the. Very true. Women during the early medieval period, women dominate. Women dominate the administration. So where you could say that they definitely slipped when it came down to warfare, you don't see these great female generals and stuff. When it comes down to the administration side of things, golden age. Who's the top women inside there? Like when it comes down to land, the deep minded, or what was it? No, it's not. It is. Oh my god, her name is out of my head. Isn't it Aid the Deep Minded? Aid the Deep Minded. You have Land of Mead. You have Gomler. You have so many women in Ireland that dominate the administration. And because of that, they are the women that dominate the golden age of Ireland. Because of the fact that women are so much in control of the administration. And it's funny because we have this word retirement. And where did they retire? Did they retire off to Iona? Did they retire off to the middle of nowhere? Like you have endless amount of men. And when a man retires, he goes off to all these places and stuff, off to the middle of nowhere, to go and pray for his soul. You don't see the same thing with women. When they say retirement, they mean that they've left married. They're no longer marrying. Where did they go? They go to the main city, the main areas of assembly, the main places of administration. There they retire into the main area of it. They're found every single day working, you know. So I don't think retirement there definitely meant retiring from marriage, but I don't think it meant retiring from work for a woman. It's great for these warlords once they survived for 50, 60 years and then they get to retire to Iona and stuff in the middle of nowhere to live out the rest of their life in peace. I don't think the same has been done with women. Da, 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 da. How much do we know back then? Would the Irish be aware of? Like, did they know about kingdoms? Yeah, well, they would have definitely known about the Iberian Peninsula, not just by written by information, but the fact that you have a lot of these Hiberno Scandinavians from Dublin, Cork, Limerick, Waterford, raiding down into the Iberian Peninsula to steal women. Remembering like those Latinas and Hispanic women definitely were worth their pinch. So they definitely went down there, and they did. Like we have sources of them going down there and stealing Iberian women and bringing them back up to Dublin to sell them. So we do have sources of that. I'd reckon you'd just be happy to have salt on your porridge, depending on your situation. Some people were living proper fancy. Like some of these people were living up to the age of 70, 80, 90. So that means they had pretty good diets in these eras. It was good eras. As long as you didn't get like the chop chop, you should be grand. Also, men when wearing a backpack. Yeah, facts. Don't some monks still cut their hair? Yeah. Bum, 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 bum. I think it was a haircut symbolized. Holy man. Yeah. Still all debated though. Every time I come across somebody who writes an article or anything on it, there's always a counter argument to what kind of hairstyle the Irish had during the early medieval period. So if you do have sources for that, definitely produce them for sure. Yeah, there's some of them warlords, man. Some of them warlords, you know. The problem is, I'm actually listening to Dr. Elizabeth Boyle right now, and she has a whole article on the poets and poetry. You might find this interesting, all right. And she was Dr. Elizabeth Boyle, and she's writing that most of the heroic poems are missing. The only surviving poems we have are written by the monks. So the poet, it's crazy. The endless amount of poets poems are missing. So many of them are missing. We were talking about starting off with about so much literature is missing. It's so true, so true. So Dr. Elizabeth Boyle, She's talking about the how so much literature is missing at this point. Da, 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 da. Norway and da, 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 da. Apart from the brutal punishment. As long as you identify yourself, if we go back to around 920 with the tale of Olaf the Peacock, which by the way was documented and written in the 12th century, so it is written 200. The version we have today is written 200 years later, but the original story is set around 920ish, well 920, 950ish. But it shows us that if you don't identify yourself, you don't go into Ireland and you can't speak Irish, because you can't identify who you are, especially if you're a war band. People don't know who you are. Very defensive because of the fact that people are going into their territory to steal their women. Local war bands will get defensive, and so if you are going to Ireland in the early medieval period, please learn your old Irish and be able to identify. Put your hands up as a war band or whoever you are, and identify who you are in Irish, or you'll get the chop chop. We know that in Olaf the Peacock, because Olaf the Peacock, when he's identifying who he is, his first attack, they throw javelins at him. He identifies in Irish who he is. They're like, "Oh my God, your Irish is so good," and then he's kind of brought into the group and stuff. And the reason for that is because of the fact you have so many Norse going in and trying to steal our women. Um, do, do, do. I don't think she. I think she identified herself as French. Uh, yeah, that's definitely true. I definitely support that one. Would you think that? I definitely would put down as Hiberno-Scandinavian, and they must have been speaking Gaelic. Because if you look at the tale of Olaf the Peacock, it gives us a good sense that you have a lot of women that are trying to put their foot down to make sure that their culture and identity stays alive. So you do have a lot of, especially by the time we get up to around 870, 880, 890, a lot of Irish speaking, but still very, 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 very debatable because two of the most important sagas are missing, which is the Dublin saga and Brian Bruce saga, which most likely was written in the language of the Hiberno Scandinavians. So very, very, very debatable. Plus, like you see that Hiberno-Scandinavian link everywhere. Like even if you look at the construction of Dublin, like Dublin is constructed and looks more like a monastic settlement. Although Norse houses to cram in as much houses as possible. Christchurch is in the middle of that, and so it's set more like in a what was it called? Kind of a monastic style setup. You know, to even start with. So Hiberno-Scandinavian is definitely a way to put it, for sure. Like. But my grandmothers were ladies, but hardly. I definitely support that one. All right. I live on my own Iona. Oh, can I stay? Can I come over and stay with you? Viking tactics for using fear and I support that one for sure. Some of these comments there definitely support. My mother had Stratton Clyde, Scottish. Oh, Jesus, that's the time already. Jeez, I have to actually finish off my work. I will finish up this conversation there and then jump away. Once Afghan is slept in. Oh, I nearly finished the comments anyway, so it's grand. Hello, everybody that's jumped on and joined us. People are happier and so less poems. Well, you had no choice but to learn Old Irish. Yeah, you do start to see that change going from Old Irish into Middle Irish, going into the 10th and 11th century for sure, and the mixing of the two languages. So I definitely support that side as well. Right, I will finish up there. Okay, so I am tomorrow. What day is it tomorrow? Friday. I'll probably do a live stream again tomorrow, right? And then on Saturday, we'll be back on at night, this time 9 o'clock. with clans and dynasties. So I'll be back on clans and dynasties on. Oh, my great crack. Cheers, buddy. Thanks for that. So I'll be going off there. Obviously, if you want to support the channel, definitely subscribe if you're not already. Also, on top of that as well, guys, you can also support the channel by going over to my Patreon at Irish Medieval History. If you don't know where that is, just click onto my page, onto my main homepage, and there you should see my Patreon, my link to head on over to Irish Medieval History. You can donate whatever you want if you want to. Also, on top of that as well, if you want to join my classes, I have classes every Sunday night in Ireland, about 9 o'clock, 9, 10 o'clock. Right now, I think it's 9 o'clock, daylight savings and all that stuff, because I'm over knocking off. But anyway, 9 o'clock, Sunday night in Ireland. No, yeah, 9 o'clock Sunday night on Ireland. Head over there, 20 quid a month. I do classes every Sunday. This Sunday, we're going to be focusing on life in 13th century Ireland. So we're covering what was life like in 13th century Ireland this weekend. So definitely head on over there. Right. So I should be back on tomorrow, covering what topic, whatever I think up. We'll probably talk about more Vikings tomorrow. More Vikings tomorrow. 10th to 11th century, it was the Middle of Irish. Bum, bum, bum. Yeah, so we'll probably cover 10th century Ireland again tomorrow, maybe. Probably 10th or 11th century. Probably, do you know what? I'll cover 11th century. We'll cover 11th century. We covered enough 10th century today. We'll talk about 11th century tomorrow. Okay. And obviously, if you want to know about the 13th century, you just pop over to my Patreon. 20 quid a month every Sunday. This month, we're going to be covering 13th century Ireland, Brian O'Neill's Revolt and the Tmod Wars, and also the start of the Scottish War of Independence. So if you're interested in any of that, definitely head on over to my Patreon. Other than that, thanks very much and slán go